This episode of the AI XR podcast is brought to you by our friends at Zapper. If you're in the XR space, you've probably felt the pain of juggling different tools, vendors, and platforms just to get an AR or VR project off the ground. It's exhausting, and it can really slow you down. That's where Zapper comes in. They've built a complete suite of tools and creative services all under one roof to make creating immersive experiences not just possible, but practical. Their next-gen 3D web tool, Mattercraft, is a game changer for building immersive experiences for headsets, smartphones, and AR, VR, and WebXR. It combines the power and flexibility of the 3JS rendering engine with a rich visual editor, making it super intuitive and easy for designers and developers to use. Put simply, you get the creative freedom of a powerful 3D engine with none of the headaches. So if you're ready to take your immersive projects to the next level, head over to zapper.com and see. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Shilowitz and Roni Abovitz for the AI XR podcast. It's Friday, June 20th, 2025.
Morning.
Good morning, guys.
We're all back in our caves today. You and I are back from AWE. Roni just got back from a meeting, so we're all hopefully in better audio shape than we were live at AWE.
God. We have Scott Stein from CNET as our guest. He'll be on in a little less than 10 minutes. So let's jump on the news. Ted, you texted me this morning about Meta making a deal with Oakley to provide some sports glasses with the same features that you find in the Ray-Bans.
Yeah, another step in kind of the marketing and branding. Now, of course, that's all part of the Luxottica family, right? Because Oakley got acquired by Luxottica a number of years ago. So that makes sense to do that. And they're expanding their brands. And then, of course, there was the Warby Parker Google announcement a couple weeks ago. So they're starting to align with brands that people already buy, right? To bring this smart technology. Still no visuals yet, right? We're still talking the audio component of those glasses. The visuals, I think, are yet to come. But, things are moving in the right direction.
Meta hardly has they don't have a great protectable position in this. And with Google coming for them, getting brands like Warby Parker, and that's important because they're putting them in front of people in retail. They have cameras, they have microphones, and you can connect to something other than Meta AI in it. So I think this is just the beginning. This is going to become normalized as we're seeing, and people are really going to decide at the moment that they're upgrading their glasses as a long-time glasses wearer. And why would you not get the better glasses at the same price?
Sure. And our friends in Cupertino taking their rightful place in history, now waiting and watching a market try and figure itself out and preparing for whatever they're going to do that connects to that Apple customer in the right way after a little bit of the stumble with the Vision Pro. So
yes, I think you're right. They'll bring out some audio smart glasses that fit into their ecosystem, and some will have displays, some will not. I have lost my religion with displays. I don't think people really need them. You're going to have your smartphone. What I would rather have is more integration of the technology that's inside of the smartphone rather than the strenuous effort to put a half-assed display in my glasses that is like 1/10 the size and the power of the screen on my smartphone. So
yeah, and I think
what's the successor to the smartphone? The smartphone and the glasses.
I think Roni and I have
you have a different view. You have a different view, but
yeah, Roni, you want to add 2 cents there for your long history in that world?
Charlie, you're right until you're not. And I think it's like this cliff where subpar display technology, you're right. And, I spent a lot of years trying to define what cracks that code where you are where you need to be. So I think you're correct in that the consumer is very demanding on, and it's because the eye is very demanding on what it wants. It wants pretty much natural perfection, but someone will get there.
Roni, I think I have to give you a compliment. I think that is maybe the most insightful thing you've ever said on this podcast or in our friendship, because that sums up our business, our sort of life trajectory, work trajectory, is everybody's right until they're not. And then the next change happens, right? That's how you got the smartphone, right? That's how you got the iPod. That's how you got computers, right? So here we are.
I mean, I think the bar is really high, and I think we thought that X billions of dollars will complete the cycle of like a true eye perfect, digital light field. But Charlie, I think when you have that experience in lightweight all day battery, I think it's kind of there. I think that's the issue, right? I think people don't want anything subpar. I don't want 80 carriers of text like blocking my field of view and like trifocals and all this kind of like. You just want the real deal, and I think Ted and I have had peeks at the real deal. Some of us know what it takes to get there. It's actually frustrating to see very large companies with infinite resources go in all the wrong directions. I almost want to scream to them like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like I had this like glimpse that that's the path up the mountain, and then like the pandemic happened. But I'm watching folks with like tons more money just make all kinds of mistakes. So it's frustrating. I just want the thing to exist at this point, but we'll see. What's going to get there, Charlie. We're getting the form factor to what people want, and we're getting the voice and the sort of AI technologies will get there. And then the last hardest thing is probably going to be like the display tech, which is the thing I spent 10 years working on. It's really hard. And for our audience, if you wonder why it's so hard, 40+% of the brain is visual processing. That's why it's so hard. It's like such a huge chunk of our brain is that. So our brain does not want subpar anything. It wants the best of the best. And no matter how much money you try to put in advertising on a Vision Pro or a Quest or whatever, 1 billion people want the real thing. They just want it right.
I would say Ted said that statement was the most insightful you've made on the podcast. But actually, I think the most insightful one is when you said AI is exactly what XR has been waiting for. And so a lot of the things that are happening in XR and in AI merging together is we're moving quickly toward this idea of a voice OS. I don't think we talk about that.
Turns out that's our podcast too, the AI XR podcast.
Well, if you think about the leap from the tactile interface that we've all gotten extraordinarily intimate and comfortable with, using this touch screen holdable device and how that is embedded in our psychology so deeply now, the leap to a visual interface, the leap to that audio visual, how do you make that as intimate and successful as a tactile interface is maybe just as hard as that visual component, right? So you have to get both of them right. And when both of them are struggling to find rightness, that's where everybody gets a little like, I don't think this is going to happen. Like it doesn't feel like it's going to happen because you have to get those two things right. And those are both extraordinarily difficult and take many, many generations of engineering and human behavior change, right? So it's fascinating.
So a couple more topics and then we'll bring in Scott. To me, obviously, I was gone, but Meta spent $14.3 billion, that used to be a lot of money, buying a non-controlling share of Scale AI, which is the company that does all the meta tags on data that people are using for AI training. So they're a real key part of the AI ecosystem. 14.3 billion is an insane amount of money, but I guess Zuckerberg is running around offering people like Ilya Sutskever $100 million as a signing bonus, which is just bonkers. Oh my God. I mean, I don't know what to think. Maybe he's, their stock is so high right now that, I guess they're just thinking that they have this amazing overvalued currency. And they should spend it while the value is really high.
Also trying to corner the market, right? Trying to find a way to build that effective walled garden that they already have, but add another layer to it and own a lot of the relevant pieces that makes sense for that company to do that.
There's an interesting question of like, can knowledge actually be walled off?
Yeah, it's a good question.
The universe that's available to us. Can you wall off science and physics and understanding? Is that really wall offable, or is it like something that's just there if you're smart enough to absorb it? Like, is it a moat to understand knowledge? I mean, that's what he's trying to do: buy knowledge, buy smart people.
So meanwhile, in the field of AI, Hollywood has dropped the hammer, this time on Stability AI, which, by the way, just added a video upgrade to it, making it more than just an image generator. But they are in big trouble with Disney and Universal. It's going to be hard for them to defend its production of Star Troopers and Darth Vader and famous movie stars. That is a lawsuit that's been waiting to happen. And of course, there's an ongoing lawsuit in London of Getty Images versus Stable Diffusion.
Also, Midjourney, right? Midjourney is being targeted by Disney.
Midjourney is being sued by Disney. At the same time, there has been an AI explosion on the socials. I don't know if you guys have seen this, based on Vio's 3 spectacular ability when prompted by Gemini, particularly to those using Flow, to create fake selfies.
Yeah, because it has the voice component now.
So. Yeah, it's so funny. And so they started doing the Star Trooper selfies. Star Trooper vlogs. They've got a Bigfoot one, which is incredibly popular. And then there are a number of historic ones, including one that I really like, which is the Christ interviews, right? They interview him on the cross. They interview him. They're interviewing Mary. She's like, do you think my parents will buy that God did it? So if you haven't checked out those memes, I strongly recommend them. And I think there's something important there in that some of it obviously is fan content, which probably the owners of the IP like Disney will let stand. But some of it is new IP. This whole, alternate take on Christ is very, very funny and interesting, because you're putting you're sort of doing what
it's like Monty Python, right?
A little, yeah, right. You're putting modern context on ancient practices and ancient folk tales. So anyway, think those are super interesting and recommend them. Let's see, what other news do we want? Oh, Apple WWDC 2026. So rather a tame affair right before AWE. Usually AWE is somewhat overshadowed by it.
Yeah, you jumped a year, 2025, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, let me comment.
You live in the future, Charlie.
Quickly on the Google Veo thing. I think if you think about using their understanding of how YouTube makes profit, the Veo thing makes total sense, right? Because you're creating this ability to make these viral videos easier, simpler, more logical. A lot of people are going to take a try at it. The ones that hit, Google will profit from, right? Because they'll run them on their platform, and they'll get their split, they'll get their cut. So it's a logical step to understand why Google would put so much resources into the Veo model when they know that it's the evolution of YouTube. Do you guys agree with that? Does that make sense?
I think that's a really, really good insight.
Well, I think that's super smart, Ted, because it also shows that the Google business model has this adaptive ability to change over time.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the sort of search ad, it's like, okay, make a video with a camera, with a video thing, sort of creators, but now, you just have better tools to make some kind of crazy long tail video, but the monetization is still the same. They've worked that out. They don't care if it's you at home with a cat or it's like a VO video driving the eyeballs. They don't care.
Right. It's just volume. It's just a volume.
And, meanwhile, for the content creators, I mean, it's like the crowdsourcing of IP, right? I mean, who votes Bigfoot?
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see if that brand building matters and extends beyond being memes. But some of that public domain material is sort of ripe for that kind of treatment.
One comment, though, because I've tried and I play with all the different tools just to get a sense of what's out there. The frustrating thing is you can get sort of ish what you want, but none of these things let you get precisely what you want.
Right. Control is the issue.
When you think about really good artists, really good musicians, filmmakers, writers, they want to write, they want to edit, they want to take the shot they want with the lighting they want. So we have a lot of almost-ish stuff that sort of looks okay-ish and is interesting. It's almost like cut up tape and you're just grabbing magazine things and pasting it together. But to get the shot you want, and Ted, you know this because you made cameras with Red and film, all that's lacking, that precision of this is the vision in my head and that's what coming out.
Yeah.
That's what's kind of frustrating. And these tools all seem to be circling, but looking across a ravine that they cannot cross in the way that they do it. And I think there's going to be an interesting like other side of this, which is absolute precision control. Some people don't, and I think just the head needs that. The torso.
But this is also the reason why so many of the higher end ones that are, focused on mainstream entertainment are doing hybrid productions. They're taking elements of virtual productions, they're taking elements of game engines, and they're using AI opportunistically, for face transfer and style transfer. But, we're working on this, as you know, anime car racing series, and we have cast a well-known social media influencer in the lead role. If it were a movie, or really even if it were a streaming series on a Paramount Plus or Netflix or wherever, you own that movie star, you've hired them, they own a piece of the back end. Why wouldn't you use their face? That's nuts. So you're going to do some kind of face transfer or style transfer. So this idea of there being a pure AI, and for the reason that Roni is saying, because why would you not want that human performance if you can get it into something that looks like animation or not really real? I think the other thing is, you're trying to make a short AI film. And I saw this in so many films that my students were trying to make, and you're doing 10, 20 generations. And at a certain point, you're like, this is good enough. I can cut around this. I'll make it work. And oftentimes they do.
Yeah.
We don't know that every shot was a compromise, but that's really what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you go back and use, as Roni was saying, use the evolution of the camera as a consumer device, not a professional device, that had added professional tool sets and professional layers over time. Now that sort of honing in on the AI, like preciseness of that is sort of the same evolution of every year the cameras in your pocket got better and better and better until they were actually cinematic tools, right?
Hey guys, we have the issue,
what
happened in Washington where there's a reporter that just popped into our conversation on Signal. Was he invited?
Scott Stein from CNET.
I swear I was invited.
I'm glad to see you.
Hi, Roni. It's good to see you. And hi, Ted.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
How are you?
Every time I see Scott at AWE, he's working.
Yeah. As it should be, but I know I didn't have any power downtime, and Apple took away a day. It was a lot.
So we were having such a great conversation about AWE. We talked for an hour, and we could have gone on all night. But we had a great conversation about AWE, and while we were talking, today's guest dropped out, and I'm like, okay, this is actually good news. Because we can have a really good conversation about AWE and trends in wearables and XR. You and Ted and I were there. And there was a lot to talk about this year. There's some real trends and some real innovation and exciting new devices announced. And of course, Spectacles was demoing and announced that they're coming out next year, which I guess we all sort of thought they were anyway, but now we got to see them and hold them. They're really trying hard to build a developer ecosystem around it. So anyway, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, for our listeners, Charlie, do you want to introduce Scott, or do you want to have Scott?
Well, Scott has been covering XR for CNET for longer than I have, so it's 10 plus years.
I thought you've been covering it. You had to have been covering that.
2016 was my beginning.
So okay, yeah. So yeah, for me, it's been like, when I started looking at the XR, it was like wearables before that, but then XR was around like 2012. Yeah.
So from a journalist standpoint, how did you come to this, Scott? How did this become a daily part of your grind, of your world?
Well, I've always been into it. So, I remember in like, it was like high school, it was like the Mondo 2000 obsession, so like I was thinking about VR and things like that back then. And I was writing plays in grad school that were about tech and kind of imagining these things. And then I fell into tech journalism through like a side channel. I started working in magazines and they connected me to it. But I started at CNET reviewing laptops because that was the position they had. But I was interested I've always been kind of interested in where we're going with what we have near us and how we connect from that sci-fi, like personal thing. And then just following the threads on what was emerging. Like, first I was thinking about phones in 2009 because it was like the future of what was going on. Moved into wearable tech through the launch of like the first mainstream, watches. So it was like the Pebble Matrix and or Martian and the Microsoft band, all that stuff. But then it was really like when I started hearing about the Oculus demo in 2012, colleague had seen the very, very first one, but then I saw the CES one, and kind of kept following the threads through then. But for me, it was like
moment. Then you locked in.
Yeah.
And that was it. Yeah.
And I was even it's funny. My first article at CNET was actually about AR and magic, which is kind of funny. It was like a quick blog post. I was just kind of talking about there were things in 2009 where I was writing about like some of the little pop-up AR experiments that were happening on phones at the time, using the camera a little bit. So I was definitely thinking about it then, but then as I saw all these other things, I just kind of kept trying to follow and glom. And as each of the territories got more finalized, I kind of moved on from them. So it was like phones, I moved away from because it was kind of getting to the point where it was like, it was more about like which iteration of phone to buy than about the idea of a phone. And then in watches, it became so much about fitness, unfortunately, because I feel like there's more. But I kind of passed that on to the team that was just looking at it as like fitness watches and things like that. But now it's a lot of XR because it's still emerging. But I'm trying to follow the blend.
Yeah. I'm curious if you remember what the laptop was that was your first article for CNET. Do you remember what the device was?
I wrote it down somewhere. It was actually the first device I looked at was like a lap desk. I think it was like some stupid post about a lap desk because it was the thing that was lying near me. But it was some like sub configuration of like an HP or something. Like I was looking at like very iterative, like everything was like the Lenovo TX4.
Nothing hyper memorable though. Nothing like for me it was the Apple Duo dock with the
No, nothing memorable. Although back then there were things like the I was always interested in the evolution of the form. So like probably CES 2010 was like the Lenovo U1 hybrid, I feel like was one of those things that was it was the pre-hybrid laptop tablet thing. Mm-hmm. And it was ahead of, actually it may have been a year after the iPad, but it was right in that zone. And as I was looking at things like the Razer, so memorable things I remember were like the Razer's first laptop, which had the second screen like in the trackpad.
Yeah, and micro screen. Yeah.
And then I used to talk with Min a lot about the updates at that time, and their Razer Edge gaming tablet, which like was the precursor to the Switch and to like the NVIDIA Shield hybrid,
the Steam Deck, and all those things. Yeah.
And so like I love that. Like that's my favorite part, is kind of like following the threads on like what can be through what is and what you see, and kind of seeing these pieces loop around and piece together. So I know there were at the beginning was definitely like working. It was like doing dishes in the kitchen. Like I felt like I was doing the like learning the ins and outs of just like endless laptop reviews.
Well, we talk on this show a lot about form factor for wearables, right? So this is that next horizon, is what gets it right, what gets it correct. We pontificate constantly about it. We were just doing it before you joined.
Yeah, I think about that. Like I've had so much time looking at wearables, and I still on watches and things. And I still keep an eye on that space. And so to me, exactly. Like I think about that. That's so coming into play now, but there's so much work to be done that I keep feeling like it's going to get there. And then I'm like, okay, well, this still needs this, this, and all these other things. But that's so interesting to me. I just try to just learn what I can, but there's always something more to learn.
All right, Charlie, you're muted for some reason. Lost you there, Charlie. All right, we'll figure it out. Roni, any thoughts while Charlie's working on his?
Well, Scott, one of the things is like you've been sort of following this field for a while. Well, if you talk about the XR side, AR, VR, and then this intersection with AI, it's not necessarily following the patterns we saw with, like, at least my view, like PCs, laptops, tablets, it has its own weird, unusual patterns. Like, is it surprising to you, or like the amount of time it's taken, and then the fact that like AI has exploded in front of XR? Like
Yeah.
what's seemingly the harder problem of AI is like blossoming, where what's probably actually the harder problem, XR, is still fracturing, companies that are spending either billions or tens or hundreds of billions. Like, did you foresee like it would be that expensive, that long, and like, we could go to Mars, we could, crack, most of AI, but still not fully crack XR? Like, why is it the hardest problem? Like, what's your take on that?
I think it's super interesting. In some ways, it makes sense because I feel like there was a time a couple of years ago where I kept talking about like the glue that was needed, to like make XR happen. And to me, that was like metaverse always felt like a code name for like the glue, whether it be like software or AI and things like that. And like if people were building hardware, but they didn't have the knitted inner function or like actual ability to do more with what they were saying was on there sensor wise or all these other things. And so I was totally surprised by that whole AI jump recently. But it's funny, like I have friends who will give me a hard time about like, oh yeah, you're covering a lot of tech, but you kind of like, you need to look at AI more. You kind of like, I think you're missing out. But I also have this weird feeling that like AI is still so rapidly evolving that it's like hard to think about if you're really missing out versus there's always a time to jump in. And so like it's very I feel like AI now is far from its final form, but people are treating it more like it's a established thing. And so I don't want it to lock in, but I also feel like it won't lock in because it's so amorphous. And so like I think about all those thoughts about AI and XR people are already been talking about, and all the sensors, all the feeds that can train the models. And like, I just look forward to that because I'm kind of getting tired of the, well, I'm also not using it as much as probably other people, but I'm getting kind of tired of the tricks people talk about that generative AI is doing now. But I wanted to do more associative things with all those other things. And so I'm like, yeah, bring on the glasses or the ones with health sensors, that can start doing all these other interesting things versus like telling me how to write an article, which feels less necessary to me. But yeah, so I don't know. It is interesting. I think I'm also a little worried now about the this is thing I was talking with people about, where I get the whole VR as a computer and AR glasses or a phone metaphor, but I'm worried about companies pivoting and focusing or losing focus. Now with AI being a big hype zone too, like where's Meta's focus? It's like, are they going to leave? I was telling Charlie, it's like, are they leaving the VR part behind? It's like, even though seems like there's room for everything, in the end, companies will kind of go with what the hot hand is. And so I worry that the landscape is a little like, unstable at the moment. And so I don't know what these forms are going to be now. I feel more uncertain about it.
Well, you're touching on the same reason that we had to change the moniker of our podcast and the focus of our podcast, because it was very XR focused for a number of years through the entire sort of arc of the pandemic. And then Charlie was like, I think we need to actually put a focus on AI as it relates to this trajectory of new devices and new ways that people will compute, because it's starting to get into that froth. And I think the point you made is really interesting, that it feels more mature than it is because of what it can do, right? Of how it can sort of permeate all these other platforms with another layer. Like we were just talking about, sort of the evolution of YouTube, the evolution of social media now has this AI component sort of withered into it, like in every possible way, but it's still extraordinarily immature, right? So it's kind of interesting that we're trying to tackle it as well week after week per your discussions.
Scott, one of the things I'd love to get your take on is just to add to what Ted's saying. I think this incompleteness is a very evolutionary experience we're having. And I think of it as like an evolutionary biology experience, like both wearables, metaverses and AI, we're adapting to them and they have to adapt to us as people. And there's this like friction of who's going to adapt more quickly. Are we going to neuroplastically remodel our brain and our social behavior to technology, or is technology going to adapt to us? But these things do not naturally work together. So I think all this friction is this like biologic evolution and synthetic. I mean, what's your take on that? Because that's like my 100,000-foot view of what's happening.
I love that take. I remember you talked about things in that zone in 2018, and it comes back in my mind now because the area I'm interested in is definitely like neurotech, and that's something that I'm trying to learn more about. I'm reading like A Battle for Your Brain, which has been on my shelf for a couple of years, and when I met with OpenBCI, they were suggesting that book, and I had this thought talking earlier with someone else who teaches like interactive performance, but yeah, it kind of hit me that definitely that we are adjusting is what we are, but there's like these dual missions of the outside and the inside that AI can or XR can tap into. Like there's a big push on physical spaces now, more like where VPS and other things that are trying to map areas like Niantic Spatial and everyone's trying to really make that physical overlay really happen. And then there's also the inside part of the possibilities with like neurotech and more aware sensors and AI that can eye tracking or things that can be basically be more aware of your internal state and meet you there. And those both feel like still really new directions. And I agree, like the thing that's existentially weird about AI is this sense of like, where am I in it? And if you like, I wrote a play that was exploring it as a creative project, and I was thinking about there's that threat that people have about like what about my jobs? What about what I am with what I do? Am I fusing with it? How do I develop a workflow? Is it remembering me? And so I think that goes into that somehow feeds into what you were saying, like the that like neuroplasticity or other things, like there's getting adjusted to the VR, but the AR is this like the AI is this relationship that that is still in flux, and I don't think there's any like real flow for that relation, or there's like there's going to be like a future model for how that works. I guess now it's very like call and response with like prompts and the idea of agentic AI, but I want it to be even more like embedded and subtle, like things.
Can I ask you a scary question, Scott?
Yeah.
Because your output, like some of us, Ted, Charlie, isn't public. It's on the internet. There's videos of you speaking. There's videos of you talking. There's lots of articles you wrote. There is some AI that either can or will very soon be a very good simulation of Scott. Yeah. And what does that mean? Where does CNET go? We did this deal with OpenAI. You no longer have any IP rights, Scott. So we just pay OpenAI $500 a year, and it just writes the Scott Stein article. I mean, that's what is being fought over with Disney and Universal and every artist in the world, and Studio Ghibli, where the AI companies claim Scott or Disney have no IP. It's our sovereign right to take it from you. So as a writer in the field who actually could be subject to this, just like any artist, sorry for getting very heady on a Friday, but what's your take?
No, this is great. I love this. It's scary. I've kind of been reckoning with that, and that was the play was actually about that too. So it was kind of like this, like me trying to take over, re-steer it, and realizing that it already knew things, and I keep thinking about like pattern making and breaking. Like, so I think what's so interesting about it kind of feels like we need to. It becomes this like how much am I pigeonholing myself? How much of a stereotype? Are you outthinking the pattern? So I don't know. There's like this battle between what you want to be with yourself, and then if you can predict it, like if you're able to like predict a Wes Anderson movie before the movie arrives, then maybe it's like, does the filmmaker need to play it up, like surprise people with the patterns, and the twists, and So I think there's always going to be a bit of a game of that. Like I want to be more interesting and pattern breaking than my AI summaries can be. And then that will train future AI summaries further. You know, like the whatever you're doing will then go into the mix. So I think there is an eventual blend. I read this book, My Life as an Artificial Creative Intelligence by Mark America, like a couple of years ago or a year ago, and it was like half written with AI, and it was a performance piece, I think, and I couldn't tell where the sensation of not knowing where the AI ends and you begin.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I wonder if it's like a framing thing that like, is it the knowledge of that, or do we become more comfortable with that? Because when I started thinking about that, it threw me out of the connection with the book. And then I wondered, or is it the style of writing, or both? Like, is it a cognitive label? So I was thinking, like, we're already extending our minds so much in how we remember things on phones and other stuff. Is that just a natural blend? And then we start getting used to versions of ourselves, like, is it a slow bleed in our lives, or we have a spectrum like mixed reality that goes from like full AI me to partial AI me to like me, and we just sort of have these like ways of connecting with you that we get used to, like we get used to making phone calls. I wonder too, like are we like, I think the neuroplasticity thing comes into my mind too, because I think about as things get more real or more convincing, we also I feel like we get more, like becoming a wine expert, we get more like subtle awareness of some
Your palate
things.
gets refined, as it was.
Yeah, your palate gets refined. So people think like, oh, you know, you're going to get there, but there's like an asymptote, like you kind of never get there. And there's always more things you might notice. Like an AV expert might notice all these things with frame rate, that pixels, you like, or music, you know, you go, I didn't listen to that. And you're like, oh yeah, that totally was atonal. I feel like we're going to get like that with AI, where we're going to have just more hyper awareness of levels that when we're like, oh, it'll be indistinguishable. I feel like there's going to be things that we're going to have more sub awareness of, and then more refinement layers too. So
Sure. Yeah.
So that's my thought, is like, I'm worried about it, but I also feel like we're going to adapt to it.
Well, a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned the word fusion, right? And we as humans tend to fuse with technology going many, many generations back, right? So we have definitely fused with various forms of technology that you review in your column and in your work, right? And all these different form factors. And the smartphone is maybe the most intimate fusing yet of a compute device, right? So I think you're touching on those nuances and and it becomes exciting and troubling for humans to think about a new fusion that may be even more intimate than anything we've ever allowed to date. And I think that's what, at the bottom line, while people can overtly say, I'm scared about AI taking my job, what they're really saying is, I'm scared about compute technology fusing with my humanity, who I am as a human biological form, even more than I've let in so far. And I've let in a lot so far, right?
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
I think that's kind of where the end game gets to. It's terrifying and sort of wonderful all at the same time, which is scary, but good.
Yeah, it's definitely scary, and it's also like we've been seeping into it. So I think, yeah, I think it's so interesting. Like there are already these models. I feel like every time I do a review, or I'm thinking about what each, like my reviews, I feel like become more like personal experience stories, and then it's like little dips into things where you go like, well, what am I observing here, or what am I feeling? Yeah, and you have these things that kind of begin to feel like they overlap. You know, people who live with fitness coaching, or things that ping you already, or things that, like, there's so many things in so many different ways that we didn't have like 10 years ago, that, like, even managing notifications like on the fly, and the like, that whole flood of things, like that wasn't a thing you know, in like 2009. I don't think people were thinking about that quite as much. But then there came the flood of like, everyone wanted notifications and nobody wanted notifications, and then people were managing filters, and then so I think there's like, I guess like what you're saying, it's scary, but then there are things you'll probably be tapping into that remind you of other things, and then you'll say, okay, it's a bit like that, but it's even more so. but then also knowing where that stuff goes, like all the data, that's like an ongoing concern. But as it becomes so deeply connected to not just the privacy, but which silo it's going into, like,
Scott, when do you go full Luddite?
when do I go? That's a good question.
When do you go full Luddite? It sounds like you are Luddite adjacent right now. But
can you
like,
guys hear me?
we can. Charlie's back.
Oh,
You're back.
That's hysterical. Luddite adjacent. I am sort of Luddite adjacent, although I like sitting right on the wall between the two. Because I feel like there was a discourse that was going on at the end of last year about, and this gets to the thing of like there's people who are thinking about AI and the singularity and this complete transformation that's underway, and it's quite real. And there are others who are looking at it as like a power grab and something that's not real and something that's, more half-baked than it seems. And everyone's kind of like going back and forth, and I'm kind of in like a yes and point of this. Like I feel all like there was also a talk like that at AWE that was like a Socratic talk about, half the group is talking about it one way, half talking about another way. And it's almost kind of frustrating because I come away going like, as somebody said in the audience, like you all have a point, and so yeah, I guess that's to your question. Like a play draft I just wrote was about people who kind of try to go all Luddite, but then I also think it's inescapable. I just read I read Brian Merchant's book, Blood in the Machine, which was about the Luddites, and I thought it was interesting because what I came away from it with, and apologies to him if I get this take wrong, was like the machines won and the companies won, but you should always fight the fight. Like the fight is important to have, but progress does keep happening, and it's hard to turn that. So I kind of feel like that's the thing I feel now is like you said, like I'm not going Luddite, but I think it's good to have these if we don't fight some of these things and talk about them, like this is all going to happen anyhow, but it's important to carve out those areas. But then I do think about how much we can do to remind ourselves of how much we can do that doesn't involve the tech. Like some of my best experiences in immersive over the years were often things that didn't involve tech, and I would sometimes take those moments to realize like a great immersive theater piece would be a great example, and also kind of like they all feed each other. It's like I'm sure like in working like you mentioned with a lot of art you do, and the way you looked at Magic Leap and mixed reality, there are great pieces of art that will inspire tech, and then there's tech that's counter-inspiring art. So I think like I want to break away and appreciate how you can do it without it, but I also think then you can loop back. But to get buried in one or the other is seems like a problem.
So let me jump in. My mic has been off. We only have about 5 minutes left, so this is probably a good thing, actually. But I did have a couple of thoughts. One is I just wanted to jump into the conversation about agency with the comment that Sam Altman was just speaking at Y Combinator earlier this week, and he thinks the war over AI is the war for memory. And that everything we're seeing in AI that is effective is because of memory, and everything we see that is defective is because of memory. And I do think that's true. I think we also have a problem now with models that are cross-training on each other, and thus becoming, once they pick up, for example, a writing tick, like a rhetorical framing, this is not a conversation, it's a breakthrough. Right? It's like, and they're all doing it. I'm like, I'm sick of this shit. I'm going to go to Grok. Grok is doing it too, because their training data is off of Twitter, which is being written by ChatGPT. And I use Perplexity.
You know what? We do it too, Charlie. Like, what are MAGA talking points? What are left-wing? Basically, someone's got a talking point and it spreads around millions. Like, it's emulating us. It's like a funhouse mirror.
It's a stylistic tick that drives me crazy. Also, rhetorical answers. The answer, more revenue.
Yeah.
Instead of saying the solution to the problem would be more revenue, which is much more straightforward and not fakely dramatic to make a point which is not really a point.
So
Revenue
I
definitely makes
actually
investors
worry.
happy, by the way.
I used to worry that I was training the AI that was going to replace me, but I don't actually think the AI is that smart. I've been trying to get it to help with my column. It should be able to help based on there being 1,000 of them, but it can't.
You should be a little more paranoid.
It can't.
No, I said, Charlie, you should be a little more paranoid because the local view you have, don't let that fool you into thinking like, where are we in 2 years, 3 years, 5
Oh
years?
yes, I mean,
Be a
I
little
have full
paranoid.
faith, right? I have full faith that there is a resolution on the horizon. I don't know if it's going to be a personal one or it's going to be done on the programming level when they start to understand the flaws in the system and the flaws in cross training.
Yeah.
So, and then the last thing I was going to say, going all the way back 20 minutes to the ancient days of 20 minutes ago, was that we were talking about AI and XR. And the first time I started thinking about that was when you, Roni, started to talk about Micah in 2018. And so I'm like, why the hell is magically fucking around with AI when they should be spending all their time on the headset? Not understanding the intimate relationship and the need for XR to the need for AI or the need that XR has to be taken to the next level in a way that has nothing to do with the display and everything to do with the intelligence and the contextual awareness.
Could I share a heartbreaking thing with you guys, especially because Scott here?
Yeah.
We had like a 50+ person team in San Francisco, sequestered in kind of a little secret, magically bunker in San Fran, of some of those brilliant AI people who are now at, each one of them is probably like $1 billion head somewhere. And that team, if no one messed with them, right? Like just left them alone with the pandemic transit, just left them, that team would probably worth like $10 billion given what they pay people right now. But like we had such a crazy good team. And I followed like where some of these guys have gone. They're like senior VPs of this and that. But we had this just before anyone really cared. We had this like huge dense mass because we felt like AI was we go, what's the killer app for all this stuff? It's going to be AI. But it was like too many weird concepts to grasp at the same time. Now, not so weird 5 years later. It was heartbreaking because like we had such a great team and nobody like knew about it or cared about it at that time.
So one final thought is somebody who influenced me a lot. Scott was talking about books that he read. So in 2016, I met Patty Mays from the MIT lab. And Patty's thesis, at least then, I haven't talked to her in a long time, but her thesis then is that we have an urge to become cyborgs. That's really what we're going to do. We want these things sort of to be internalized. And I think that's what Scott, you were talking about a few minutes ago, about these things having to be so seamless that it's almost like thinking about it.
Yeah. And then it becomes something that, and then it's scary because you could lose that and go, well, where is all of my stuff? But then I think it's where, and then it's a sense of if you're divorced from that, if you lost yourself. But I think it's also a bit of a leap of faith in how you approach. This is where I go back to the Luddite feeling, which is kind of like, I think that you want to know how to drive on your own as much as you want to be taught how to drive automatically. You want a little bit of both so that you also maybe appreciate the cyborg part of you more, but it becomes something like, I think it's like a dance. Down that road, because I do feel like I'm heading towards it, or we're all heading towards it. It's going to seep in. It's like the glasses are another approach, or assistive tech. I keep thinking about by the time I'm older, not far away, how much I'm going to be assisted by technology that's going to be acting as extensions of my brain to the point where my final years really do feel like that singularity thing, and it's like, I think that's an interesting like moment that's going to be popping up.
Well, and I think one of the things you're touching on, and one of the things we're also a little concerned about, is individuality versus commonality, right? Technology sort of delivers common paths to people that allows us to do all the things that we can do in this sort of interweaved, interconnected tech. We can text with each other, we can email, we can do video chat like this on different platforms. We have all this tech, but it removes some of the individual paths, right? Of saying, I actually prefer a different, I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. But it disallows that. Like, yes, you can choose to sort of take the more Luddite path, but then you're going to give up all of those both conveniences and practicalities that common tech has brought with just a few operating systems and a few devices or device, categories that sort of permeate the world, right? So you, as you write stuff, and obviously you've got a continual existential crisis with the fact, like I think all of us do that are involved in tech. At some point, we evolve to the point where it's like, I would love it if I could just do this, but I can't, right? Because it's too individualized, and that's a problem area that I'm curious if you would maybe comment on a little bit with your writing, with your thought.
Yeah, this will be the home stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of so if I get this right, you're mentioning kind of like the is it like kind of the balance between the problem zones and the evolutionary zones, and like how I kind of wrestle with that as the technology.
Everybody does the same thing, right? It's yes, we can all do this together because a giant tech company owns that, as opposed to much more individualized paths.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a bit of that battle right now with social media, and then it's interesting because I always mispronounce it. Forgive me, Jaron Lanier.
Lanier, yeah.
Lanier. Okay, apologies, because I've talked to him several times, but he wrote those two books. One about in 2018. It was like one was his book about VR, which was great, but also how to quit social media, which I thought was like very ahead of its time.
That was his recent book, yeah.
Or 10 Reasons to Quit. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing, but I feel like I started thinking about it then, and the way we're atomizing now, and how we're and creators are branching off, and the question of big media. It feels like a battle of that going on in the media landscape, but also like how we're all going to approach how we connect with each other too, and what it means to own that versus branch off. But I also think that we are going to be like we're going to keep wrestling with that, and I think that it's not wrong to have science fiction dreams permeate your wishes, because I feel like that inevitably happens. But I keep thinking about like the Force, or like teleporting, or like, I kind of feel like these little effortless things are going to start popping up in how we connect with the world to manipulate them or change them or do things. And then you're going to have these like seamless moments versus like, I got to stop and be like, it's a junk food versus losing weight, or say, like there will be moments you might be like, I don't want it to be so seamless. I want to have a little more granular control. I got to be responsible now, and so I think there's going to be interesting games with that. I think that's already happening now with how people are talking about, for a long time, don't doom scroll so much, don't do this, I have a phone addiction, I have that, and and it's the gluiness of the addictiveness of it that I think XR is way too jangly right now to be really sucking people in, but when it does, then I think there are going to be all those questions all over again. Like,
yeah, I think it is easily sucked.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, this has been a great podcast. Scott, you will be back. Great to see you and great to chat. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you back here next Friday.
That was great being on there.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Good seeing you, Scott.
I could sing you too.